This session in our suite of programs on helping people make changes in their lives, working them through conflict situations and also dealing with crises. It works very well, does this session, with what went last week when we looked at implementing or affecting change, in particular the material on the I change model and the representation of the trans-theoretical model of change. Back to my health warning on the trans-theoretical model of change, I'm going to call it the wheel of change so it doesn't scare you. People seem to shy away from that, the trans-theoretical model of change, because it's got a complicated name, but it's just the change wheel, and we'll move on to the change wheel towards the end of the presentation today. So I'm going to point out essentially what motivational interviewing is, link it. The posh word for that in academia is called synthesize it. I'm going to synthesize it with the wheel of change model, and I'm going to help demonstrate how motivational interviewing might overcome ambivalence and client resistance, which is what we introduced last week. The first thing I want to establish on motivational interviewing is this idea, which is the spirit of motivational interviewing. I've said previously that if you've only got a hammer, the only tool that you can use to fix things is a hammer. What hopefully this module is giving you is a lot of different tools that you can use in direct work with people, communication skills, theoretical understanding and motivation, and here we have motivational interviewing. If you work in schools with young people and things like that as well, you know that you have to work in skillful ways, perhaps in ways that you might not work with your own children, or maybe, I often think that the way that I worked with young people that weren't my own children, I was a better person. My kids can make me lose it. I end up shouting at them and things like that occasionally, which I regret. And maybe if I'd used more techniques like this motivational interviewing stuff with my kids, I'd achieve better outcomes, because I do think it is an effective way of working. I can't teach you this element of the spirit of motivational interviewing. Like, I can give you various techniques that I'm going to do, like OARS, OARS, and the RULE of motivational interviewing, nice little acronyms. This is something a bit deeper than that. It's about how you go into the relationship with the young person or the client, essentially about being authentic to yourself and being confident in yourself, and also not having those commentaries that we all have running in our heads, but to be completely available to the young person or the client and really deeply listening. Similarities with Egan's active listening that I gave you a couple of weeks ago here, really listening to what the needs of that other person are. What I'm going to ask you to do is, which one of those do you prefer, A or B? So this first example of you just need to concentrate to get the job done, if it's delivered in sort of a directing style, it seems based on a conviction that your learning is impeded by something the student lacks. In this case, it's the concentration. You're not concentrating hard enough. That's where the problem is. This second sentence uses a guiding style. So, you're the expert in your world. What's the thing that you need? Another thing to watch out for is when a person presents with a difficulty or a problem, is to avoid the writing reflex. This is something that I had when I began my social work career. One of the things that I had to learn was that sometimes people are coming to you with this: I don't want you to fix this, I just want you to hear me. I just want you to listen to me. I don't want you to propose an advice and a solution to this. I just want you to sit and listen and really hear what it is that I've got to say. To suspend my tendency to want to put it right, to fix it, and just listen to a person. And the reason why a person wants listening to is that usually through talking it out themselves, they're already figuring out the plan that they're going to use to sort out the problem themselves. They just need to hear themselves say it out loud and for you to listen to it and engage with it. and maybe make suggestions, guide and things like that. But ultimately, the power, the force, the motivation is coming from them, the client or the young person. The spirit of motivational interviewing involves guiding. So, as I say, Miller and Rolnick invented, or developed rather, MI in the early 1980s. And what it aims to do is to get the client engaged in a process of change talk. In your assignment, I would like you to use the word, if you can, change talk. So here I am giving you direction, which is kind of what people requested. So I'm fulfilling that, hopefully. I would like you to use the word change talk, and I would like you to use, reference that to motivational interviewing. So what you're trying to do is start eliciting change thinking, which we've called contemplation to change, with reference to the change wheel, change thinking, and then planning for change. And change talk exists around that realm of change, of contemplating change and then planning for change. So as I said previously in my example, when you say to the person, look, I don't want you to offer advice or provide a solution. I just need you to hear me out. I just need you to listen to what it is that I've got to say. And what the person is telling you, or they've probably not got knowledge of this theory, motivational interviewing, that they're saying, let me think this through talking to you, so I know what I need to do in this change process. Don't give me the solution, just let me talk it through. And in that process of talking through, it helps me to organise my ideas into an action plan. So, in the conversational style, the communication style of motivational interviewing, there are three broad approaches: directing, guiding, and following. Each one of those three styles can be useful in different circumstances. If you recognise that you can adopt three particular stances towards helping people, which is a more directive style, sometimes a more guiding style, and often adults struggle with this, especially if they're working with children, this following style. They believe that, their roles conferred in them as adults or parents or teachers, they never follow. So that red triangle moves, from directing, you must do this, your behaviour simply isn't good enough. They'll soften it a little bit to move towards guiding, but maybe won't be willing to relinquish some of that control and slip into the following mode, going along with what the child or young person wants to do. Maybe that's partly held up in our culture, and especially cultures of organisations like schools and things like that. So this is a quotation from a student learning motivational interviewing. I'm shifting a little bit more into the centre point of guiding there that I've put on my little diagram for you. When how I deal with people, I try to stand with 2 feet planted firmly in the guiding style and shift, i.e. use other tools, to either side as necessary. Adopting a stance of the centre ground, which is the guiding stance. Adopt the guiding stance, even before you've met anyone. And know that you can move into a more directive approach if necessary, but also be willing, which can be challenging, as I said, for adults, especially in the roles that we do, to sometimes slip into that following style if necessary. The thing that I always say is this is an art, it's not a science. Working with people is an art form. The more tools or paintbrushes, to stretch the metaphor, that you have, the more effective you are as a practitioner. So these aren't rules rigidly to be applied, but the fact that you have more paintbrushes and more tools enables you to work in more creative ways. These acronyms, I like acronyms because it helps you to remember them when you're having to think on your feet and you might be working in a crisis situation where you don't have time to memorize things. But ideas such as rules and ORs and GEMS and these kind of acronyms are very useful for them to pop to the forefront of your mind when you're working with someone. So it's like, right, what's the rules here? So this is another precise technique. As I said, you can use rule, you can use ORs. If you read the sort of literature, you'll have seen ORs being used. ORs is an acronym for asking open questions. Affirming. I've said things like, yes, that's a good idea. Yeah, I can see how. Yeah, good. Yeah, you've come up with a good example. Yet there, you know, you can see how I've affirmed your contributions there. Reflecting is trying to paraphrase the ideas that the person is coming up with. So what you're saying is this, and then this summarizing is what I'm actually doing now. We're sharing a shared understanding of what's going on here in this session. This is the trans-theoretical model of change, the wheel of change that I gave you. The interesting points of this, I think, when we're trying to get someone to change, at the pre-contemplation stage, which is ambivalence, no desire to change or not even thinking about it, before, contemplation, thinking, before thinking. And the next stage is this contemplation, stage 2. Change talk and working with people's motivation exists in this stage 2 contemplation. As I said at the start of the presentation, change talk also exists in the preparation stage, when people start preparing and talking about, well, what I need to do is this, or I think what I should be doing is this, and that kind of thing. That's change talk relating to preparation. So here I am summing up, linking motivational interviewing with other theories that you've come across thus far. How we speak to people is likely to be just as important as what we say. Remember I said the Morabian thing, that actually only 7% of your message is what you're saying. You know, the other 93% relates to your sort of your how you say it and your posture, your body language. And that's Albert Morabian's work from the communication session. Being listened to is perhaps the most important motivational factor for achieving change with other people. And I gave you this in Egan, Egan's 3-stage model, and also relating to motivational interviewing, that you don't jump the gun. You don't use the writing reflex, not WR, but writing to make things right, to try and prematurely fix the problem. You need to listen to people fully first. Like I said at the start of this presentation, the person who has the problem is the person who has the answer to solving it. The solutions to people's problems lie in themselves, because nobody understands the problem quite like they understand the problem. Okay, I'm not going to read that slide. I'm going to open it up and I'll just leave that on the screen for you.